All right, let's dive into the incredible journey of an amino acid you probably know, tryptophan. But it has a secret life, a main gig that is absolutely critical. We're going to trace its primary metabolic route, the Kynurenine Pathway, and see how it builds one of the most important molecules in your entire body. So yeah, you hear tryptophan, you think turkey, sleepiness, serotonin, melatonin, right? That's what it's famous for. But what if I told you that's just its side hustle? Seriously. Its main job, its real purpose, is to produce a coenzyme that is fundamental to, well, life itself, NAD+. And this really shows you what I mean. Just look at those numbers. A staggering 95% of all the tryptophan you get from your diet is shuttled directly into this kynurenine pathway. That leaves only a tiny 5% for all that serotonin and melatonin stuff. It really puts into perspective just how vital this pathway truly is. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with tryptophan's two very different fates. Then we'll walk step by step through the kynurenine assembly line. We'll meet the crucial vitamin workforce that keeps it all running, see what happens when that line breaks down, and then we'll wrap it all up with a super high-yield exam blueprint to make sure it all sticks. Okay, first up, let's look at this fork in the road. Tryptophan arrives and has to go one of two ways. And as you're about to see, one of these paths is basically a metabolic superhighway, while the other, it's more like a quiet little side street. So just to lock it in, the minor pathway, using less than 5%, makes those famous neurotransmitters and hormones. But the major pathway, handling the other 95%, is completely dedicated to making NAD+ and NADP+. And you have to remember, these coenzymes are the electron carriers that power everything. Glycolysis, the TCA cycle. They are absolutely essential for making ATP, the energy that runs our cells. All right, now for the main event. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the kynurenine assembly line. We're going to follow a single tryptophan molecule as it gets transformed step by step into its final crucial form. Every production line has a first step, a point of no return. And for this pathway, this is it, the rate-limiting step. An enzyme uses oxygen to literally crack open tryptophan's ring structure. In the liver, the main enzyme is tryptophan pyrrolase, or TDO. In other tissues, it's an enzyme called IDO. And IDO is really interesting, actually, because it plays a huge role in our immune system. But the bottom line is this one reaction controls the speed of the entire pathway. Okay, next up are two pretty quick modifications. First, an enzyme called formamidase just snips off a little formyl group. That gives us our star intermediate, kynurenine. Then, kynurenine 3-hydroxylase comes in and adds a hydroxyl group. And right here we meet our first essential vitamin helper. This step absolutely requires FAD, which, as you know, comes from vitamin B2 riboflavin. Now pay close attention, because this next step is a huge one for exams. The enzyme is kynurenase, and it completely depends on PLP, which comes from vitamin B6. It cleaves our molecule, pushing it down the line, but it also releases a molecule of alanine. And why is that a big deal? Well, alanine is glucogenic. That's just a fancy way of saying our body can use it to make brand new glucose. It's a perfect example of how amino acid breakdown is directly plugged into our energy metabolism. We are so close. An oxidase enzyme opens up the aromatic ring to form quinolinate. And then, from quinolinates, with a little help from things like ATP and PRP, we finally get it. The end product, NAD+. You might also know it as niacin or vitamin B3. This is the whole point. We've just turned an amino acid into a powerhouse coenzyme that is absolutely critical for everything from making energy to repairing our DNA. So we've seen these vitamins pop up along the way. Let's just take a moment to spotlight this vitamin workforce that keeps the whole assembly line from grinding to a halt. Let's do a quick recap of our key players. Vitamin B2, as FAD, was essential for that hydroxylation step. Vitamin B6, as PLP, was the absolutely critical co-pilot for that kynurenase cleavage reaction. And then, in this really cool twist, vitamin B3, niacin, isn't a helper at all. It's the final product we were making the whole time. It just goes to show how interconnected these B vitamins really are. So we've seen how the assembly line works perfectly. But what happens when a machine breaks? What happens when a part is missing? This is where we get into the really important clinical side of things. The number one clinical condition you need to associate with this pathway is pellagra. It's a nasty disease caused by a severe deficiency of niacin. Now, this can happen for one of two reasons. Either you're just not eating enough niacin in your diet, or your kynurenine pathway is broken and you can't make your own niacin from tryptophan. For any exam, you have to know the classic 3 Ds of pellagra. First, you get dermatitis, which is this really awful, sun-sensitive rash. Then, diarrhea. And finally, dementia, which really underscores the devastating neurological impact. And it makes sense, right? It's a disease that affects the whole body because literally every single one of our cells needs NAD+ to function. This table is your high-yield summary of the clinical stuff. So if you have a vitamin B6 deficiency, that kynureninase enzyme gets jammed up. The pathway backs up, and you end up with a buildup of something called xanthurenic acid, which spills into the urine, and we can measure it. Then there's Hartnup disease, which is a genetic problem with absorbing tryptophan in the first place. Less tryptophan means less NAD+, leading to symptoms that look just like pellagra. And of course, pellagra itself is the end result of not enough niacin. All right, it's time to lock this all in. Let's distill everything we've talked about into your final exam blueprint. These are the absolute must-know facts. Let's do a rapid-fire review. Where does this mostly happen? The liver. What's the rate-limiting enzyme? Tryptophan pyrrolase, TDO. What are the key vitamin helpers? B2 and B6. What's the final product? NAD+, also known as niacin. What are the key diseases to know? Pellagra and Hartnup disease. And what's that diagnostic marker for a B6 deficiency? Xanthurenic acid in the urine. Boom, that's your flashcard. And that's the Kynurenine Pathway. You see, it's so much more than just a list of enzymes and molecules to memorize. It's this beautiful, elegant system for turning one single amino acid into a molecule that powers our cells. It's a perfect window into how our metabolism is regulated by vitamins and how a breakdown can give us direct clues into a person's health. It really makes you think, doesn't it?